In this lecture, we're going to talk about the last part of the CIA Triad. We have already talked about confidentiality and integrity, which then brings us to availability. Pretty simple. We want the people who are supposed to access the system to have access whenever they need to. If I can't access something that I need to do my work, well then I can't work. If our e-commerce website is down, well then we don't get sales, then we might go out of business. And if we look at the attacks that are targeted at our availability, really we need to look at why are they attacking us? What is the purpose? What are they trying to gain? That could be a denial of service attack or a distributed denial of service attack. They're just trying to drown our server with thousands or hundreds of thousands of connections that would either make the system crash or just not be able to handle regular transactions. It could be a physical attack. They could just drive a truck through our wall into our data center, destroying our servers. It could be a disgruntled employee. If they didn't get the promotion that they wanted for the third time, now they're angry, they might just go and shut down some critical systems, availability gone. And just like with the confidentiality and the integrity, this does not have to be malicious. It could just be someone doing something they either are not supposed to or they don't know that they're not supposed to. Regardless of why it happens, the web server is down, we don't make money anymore. And you will probably hear me say this a couple of times throughout the course, 95% of cybersecurity incidences is when either we do something we're not supposed to or we don't do something we're supposed to. Doing something we're not supposed to could be we could leave a back door into a program. Sure, it's easier for us as the programmer to get to where we want to be in the program, but it's also an easy way in for the attacker. Not doing something that we should do could be we don't patch a specific system. We know there's a patch out. We know we should patch it, but we just don't get around to it. And there really can be a wide array of reasons why our availability is compromised. It could be an application error. If the application is written poorly, it will probably crash often. Again here, system down. It could be the hardware. The server could crash. A disk could die. It could be the HVAC that we have in our data center. The power could be out. The internet could be out. All that can cause our data to not be available. So here again, we want to implement the appropriate countermeasures that in this scenario make sense. We want exactly enough security, no more, no less. If I have $10,000 laying on my kitchen table, or we have data that we say this is worth $10,000, how much should we spend to protect that? Well, it's not going to make sense to spend $100,000 to protect that $10,000. It's the same with our availability. If you ask senior management how much uptime do we want on our e-commerce server, they're probably going to say 100%. We never ever want our server to be down. And we can do that. We can have it up 24/7, 365. But what if that means we need to build multiple data centers? That could be tens of millions of dollars. Is that something that makes sense? Maybe we can get 99.999% uptime and senior management is happy with that, and we can maybe do that for $50,000 or $100,000. So we need the exact right security profile for what we are protecting, and that both means that we have enough security, but it also means that the cost is appropriate with what we're protecting. One of the things that can help us make sure that we have CIA could be patch management. A patch is when a vendor issues fixes to any of the security vulnerabilities that their software has. If our systems are patched and up to date, it is less likely we will be compromised. Because when the company releases their patch, at that point, attackers also know what the flaw is. If you remember when Equifax was breached, they lost 150 million social security numbers in the US. That's basically half the US population. It could have been completely avoided. 2 months before that breach, a patch was out for those systems. But that is sort of the tricky part with patches. The vulnerability is out. That means the attackers know what the vulnerability is. They know which systems to attack and how. But for whatever reason, Equifax chose not to patch their systems for 2 months. And I'm not saying here we should just go in and apply the patches as soon as they are out. We need to test them. Because if it fixes 99 things and breaks one critical thing, we may not want to implement. So we go in to our test environment, we apply the patches, we make sure that everything works right, and assuming that the end users for those systems don't see any issues and we don't see any security issues, we implement to our production environment. But we don't wait 2 months to patch our systems, giving the attacker enough time to breach our systems. Another thing we can do that will help tremendously with availability is redundancy. We can have redundant hardware, systems, connections. So if we have a critical system, instead of having only one server, maybe we have two servers. They could be in separate data centers. We can either have load balancing, where data is sent to both, or we can have an active-passive pair. If we have active-passive, then the passive server will check on the active server every second. Are you alive? Are you alive? Are you alive? And if 3 keep alives are not answered, it takes over and becomes the primary. And here, obviously, both systems have to be spec'd to carry the entire load. The same with power. We have 1 or 2 pairs of UPSs, where if one of the pair dies, the second one can carry the entire load of the data center or that part of the data center. We have multiple generators. We have multiple HVACs. HVACs are just abbreviations for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So if one unit dies, the other have enough to take over. And this is mostly in data centers, where you can have thousands and thousands of servers that put out a lot of heat. So we need to pull that heat out. We need to make sure that the humidity and the temperature in the data center is at optimal range for the hardware we have. I have worked in a place where one AC died and the rest wasn't enough to carry the whole data center. We had to start shutting hundreds and hundreds of servers down that were non-critical because we only had enough cooling for the critical systems. Bad design. I have also worked a place the power was run wrong. There were technically enough UPSs to carry the entire load of the whole data center on both sides, but they had run like 70% of the servers to one side and only 30% to the other. And UPSs work in pairs. So on the left side of the data center, we would have 2 UPSs. On the right side, we would have 2. When at some point, someone shut down one UPS on the side that had 70% of the servers, there was too much load for the single UPS that was left to carry it. It was like 110%. So to save itself, that UPS shut down on its own. Now, 70% of all our servers are down. That is a resume producing event, RPE, which really means you do something so bad, you need to start typing up your resume because you need to find another job. All right, back to redundancy. So redundancy is really having extras of everything, or at least the things that make sense. On the server, we can have extra disks. They can be set into RAID. So if one disk fails, perfectly fine, the data is still on the other disks. We just need to replace the one that failed. We can have multiple power supplies on the server. So if one power supply fails, the other takes over. It can carry the entire load of the server. We have multiple paths out to the internet, meaning each server has 2 connections that go to different switches, that go to different routers, that go to different internet providers. If one internet connection is down, the other one can carry the entire load. See the picture here? Redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. And of course here, in the places where it makes sense. The lunch menu for the cafeteria is probably not critical enough to have multiple servers in multiple data centers. But if we're talking about patient data, yes, very much so. I hope that was not too much ranting about availability, but since the CIA Triad are such core principles of what we're going to be talking about throughout the entire course, I think it makes sense to spend a little more time here, and for you to be very clear on what it is, why we do it, and how we do it. And with that, we are done with availability. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next lecture.